You're listening to CreepGeeks Podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/cheapgeek. So welcome back to the CreepGeeks Podcast. This is episode number 130.
Leaked UFO documents, senators receive classified UFO brief, the Corsica Cat Fox, Lochness monster filmed, and space recap.
Yeah.
Load it.
Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah.
So welcome back to the CreepGeeks Podcast. Glad to have you here. If it's your birthday today, happy birthday. But other than that, we've got a lot of wonderful things to talk about, so let's get right into it. Are you ready?
Sure.
So what's this podcast all about for those who have tuned in for the very first time?
Broadcasting paranormal news and fun stories from our CreepGeeks Bunker Studio in the mountains of western North Carolina. We're an offbeat news podcast that takes a lighthearted approach to the strange, the stupid, paranormal, and tech topics circulating the web.
Yes. So here's where we talk about some stuff we hope you find to be interesting. And if you do us a favor. You can check us out on all the major platforms as iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Yes, Google Play Music, all those wonderful places. And if you happen to listen to our podcast there, rate it.
Yeah.
Pretty easy to do. Little rating helps.
Ratings actually help podcasts grow because they increase the visibility of the podcast to a larger audience.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like spreading the word.
Yes, it is. And also, if you do like the podcast and you do tune in frequently, we do really appreciate it, and it's definitely helping the podcast to grow. If you'd like to support the podcast in a quick and easy way, you can do it like this. If you shop on Amazon, as we all do, if you use our little affiliate link, we'll get a small percentage. Doesn't change your price at all. It helps us keep the coffee flowing and gas in our Albino Rhino, which is our DIY camper van adventure investigation mobile. Yes. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that we had a contest to actually name the Albino Rhino the Albino Rhino. It's been something that we've been using ever since.
Yes.
Because we actually go out and investigate some of the things that we talk about because we figured why not? Right?
Yeah.
Like ghost hunting. So we joined a paranormal investigation team, all of that sort of thing. So it's very nice. And so we do that sort of thing because, well, a couple of different reasons. Number one, we like it.
Yep.
And we like to share. And number two, we like coffee and taking adventures and going places. And it's a good thing. So if you want to help us, you can certainly do that. If you just want to share something interesting with us, we have a phone number set up for you so you can actually give us a call and leave us a message.
That phone number is going to be 575-208-4025.
Yes. So you can call and leave a message, and if you have an experience you want to share or something like that, you can certainly do that. We do appreciate it. And if you'd like to share something, but you're worried about us telling everyone who you are, we won't. Anonymity is guaranteed if you so desire. It's completely up to you. Dun, dun, dun.
And you can go to the website, which is creepgeeks.com, and then click on the Contact Us form.
Yes, it's an easy form for you to fill out, and it goes right to us.
Yes.
So, as this podcast has been around for 130 episodes,
Yeah.
we like to include something called the Interesting Random Factoid. Yes.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with how long we've been around, but it's a interesting random fact that we hope you find interesting. Yes. So this interesting random factoid is
something that most people are probably aware of but didn't realize.
Yes, and it concerns the youth of society today.
That's an ominous way to put it.
Well, it is kind of an ominous thing. So
but
you
may have noticed this when hanging out or being around young adults, millennials, and others. And that is that nearly half of young adults no longer wear deodorant, according to a recent study. This study,
Gross.
yeah, it's kind of like yikes. This study was actually done by a company called YouGov, which is a polling firm that's actually directed towards young adults and teenagers. So I'm pretty sure their statistics are on point because they directed this directly to them. Like, hey, could you answer this? And 40% of these young adults said, no, I don't typically wear deodorant.
Yes.
40% of 18 to 24-year-olds. And it doesn't make it any better because 30% of adults from 25 to 34 don't wear deodorant either.
Yes.
Now, the reason is that most people surveyed felt they don't believe they need it.
Well, I'm here to tell you. You should probably wear it because you kind of stink a little bit.
And
So
I don't know what mindset, maybe the mindset from different cultures that don't necessarily believe in deodorant, but as far as...
You don't have to believe in UFOs or Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster or ghost or anything like that, but you need to believe in deodorant.
True. I kind of think it's messed up because it's like this article starts to fall apart at the end, which says doctors, however, advise applying deodorant daily. And the first thing I thought of was some of the medical issues and allergies to deodorant and certain chemicals that we do put on our bodies every day.
Well, sure.
And that's why they make aluminum-free deodorant. They make herbal deodorant. There are ways...
There's even a rock you can rub around your armpits as opposed to...
Yeah, like a salt rock.
Yeah.
There are natural ways to deal with body odor because even if you can't smell it, other people can. In fact, in 15 minutes of being around a bad odor, unless you have a very sensitive nose, you will actually no longer acknowledge that bad odor.
Yeah. Which is not saying that that's okay.
Yeah. So
That's your body's way of turning it off so it doesn't kill you.
if you stink, use some soap.
Yeah.
If you stink, use some deodorant. And then at the end of this article, it mentions how the study found these young adults are more likely to wash their hair each day. And the first thing I thought about, because we'll talk about the 40s and 50s later on in this podcast episode, is back in the 40s and 50s, women would take 1 week a night to shampoo their hair. And now these young people are washing their hair every day.
But not their pits.
Which is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're kind of stripping the oils from your hair.
Going to need you to shower up, hit all the important bits, and put on some deodorant. It's all about hygiene. Get with the program, man.
But it's just kind of startling. I mean...
It actually explains a lot. 'Cause
yeah.
If you've ever been around a bunch of stinking teenagers...
Or a festival.
Yeah, somebody needs to, let them know. Maybe they're not getting their feelings hurt.
Enough.
Yeah. Like,
So-
hey, what smells like an onion? Oh, it's you.
It's you, Karen.
Yeah. Put some stuff on, Karen.
So, yeah.
Kyle. Yeah, get away from that drywall and put on some deodorant. So there you go. And you can even get like you can pick a commercial that you like and wear the deodorant from the commercial. So you can have something to relate to. But either way, you should do it. Wear the deodorante. It's good for you.
So-
Actually, it's better for us.
It's better for everybody else. It's a community service.
Yes. And we appreciate it. If you would wear it.
But I really like what you said earlier. You don't have to believe in Bigfoot and aliens,
Nope.
but you can believe in deodorant.
You should believe in deodorant. You should believe in Old Spice and Speed Stick and Right Guard and all those.
Heck, you can believe in Axe for
Yep.
all I care.
Gross. Get clean. At least smell like it. Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, so that was...
Anyway,
that
there's
was
your
my
filthy,
factoid.
interesting random factoid. Filthy. Okay, so we do have a lot of news to talk about, and there's a couple different things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the leaked UFO documents and a disturbing agenda. Some senators received classified briefing on UFO sightings. Just when we thought the Loch Ness Monster was dead because cell phones killed it in one of our previous podcasts, looks like we might be wrong about that because a couple filmed Loch Ness Monster.
Wow.
There's a new cryptid out there. It's called the Cat Fox.
Which sounds adorable.
Yes, and we're on the trail of a new species with that. We're going to recap our adventure at the space thing we went to,
Yeah.
which is the Spruce Pine Alien Convention and Expo, including some of the people that we've seen there and got to kind of interact with a little bit. And if you haven't seen or listened to our previous episode, we met a psychic. Yeah. We did. And basically we had an interview and an investigation footage with that. So there you go. So we're going to go ahead and roll into the first article, because this particular podcast is pretty much all about news this time, because there is some good stuff. You ready?
Yeah.
So it kind of goes like this. The leaked UFO document and a disturbing agenda. This is from Mysterious Universe, and this article was actually written by Nick Redfern.
Okay.
And Nick Redfern has an interesting idea about Roswell in general, which we'll talk about in just a second. This article is actually pretty lengthy for a Mysterious Universe article, so it kind of goes on for a while, right?
A lot of detail. It's very dense. Yeah.
But we'll kind of set up the beginning and then sort of explain some of it as we go along. So that way, if you want to read any of the articles or anything that we talk about on our podcast, you can go to CreepGeeks.com. Whenever we do a podcast, we put all of our show notes there. You can click them because the links are clickable if you want to do your own little research. So it started like this, okay? 2002, Timothy Cooper was a UFO researcher from California. He got out of the subject for whatever reason, sold all of his UFO files to ufologist Dr. Robert Wood. And then evidently Nick Redfern spent a week in Orange County, California, in a motel room, logging every one of the items that's contained in that guy Cooper's vast document collection. And he was hired by Bob Wood. Right?
Yeah.
So one of the ones that he talks about is an undated 8-page extract from a longer, very seldom seen document titled UFO Reports and Classified Projects, the CIA Perspective. So it was evidently provided to Cooper indirectly by an alleged CIA source that he called Blue Boy.
That's a
kind of weird, but
yeah.
Well, I can see it, right? But it details a controversial theory that links Roswell with down-to-earth, as opposed to extraterrestrial, biological warfare activities and the Nazis. And the document itself is a draft of a briefing paper and provides a concise history of the role of the United States government and military with respect to UFOs. In other words, saying that the beginnings of our whole UFO thing, when it became popular in the 40s, is actually linked to Nazis and biological warfare activities. Okay. Yeah, so when I read that, I'm like, okay, I'm in. I got to read all of this, right? Yeah. So I read it a couple different times. I'm like, wow, this is really, really long. And it kind of makes sense. So the opening pages of the document are missing, the ones that kind of provide a date and a sort of a timeline. But it does mention the 90s, and it also mentions some other leaked documents. But it kind of starts like this. Since 1969, the government has taken the official position that unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, do not exist and do not pose a threat to national security. And it's all based off of the conclusions reached by Project Blue Book, which is from 1948 to 1969. So there's the first part.
Yeah.
They don't exist. And then, of course, Freedom of Information Acts happened, that sort of thing. People have been doing research for a long time. All this sort of goes back to and stems from Roswell. Right? Roswell, UFO crashed. Alien bodies were supposed to be there. They were taken away, along with the wreckage was taken away. Newspaper article came out, basically said, flying saucer and all that sort of thing. It became this big thing and became one of those large cover-ups that sort of kicked off the whole UFO flying saucer phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
So, pretty much, it goes all the way back into like Roosevelt and everything. But the way it sort of worked out, and this is a high-level overview of the entire thing, and this includes Operation Paperclip, where Nazi scientists were taken, from Germany towards the end of the World War II scenario and brought over. It really kind of boils down to these basic things. And you can read this article in great and agonizing detail if you want. But the Nazis were looking at using different types of flying vehicles, right, like the flying wing and flying saucers, or the round shape, oval shapes, that sort of thing, right, to be able to fly weapons great distances. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. To be able to, utilize those weapons for pretty much weapons of mass destruction, more like biological warfare. And, they originally became sort of thinking about the idea when they were using the V-2 ballistic missiles.
Okay.
But they wanted to have some kind of aerial machine that could basically deliver biological weapons or even atomic weapons anywhere in Europe or the continental United States. And Germany's atomic bomb program had a 2-year head start ahead of our project, which was called the Manhattan Project. So in 1948, Department of Army circulated a document talking about the German High Command indicated a definite interest in the Horton type of flying wing, right? And that they were about to embark in a rigorous campaign to develop an aircraft towards the end of that year. So they even laid out where the plant was going to be and the fact that the actual manufacturing facility was technically or currently at that time in the hand of the Russians.
Oh.
So they were talking about trying to get any additional intelligence on aircraft whose shape approximate that of an oval, a disc, or a saucer. And they wanted to, have, there's this thing called the boundary layer, which is, a boundary layer is when you fly. It's, if I understand it correctly, it has to do with like friction and things like that. If you can reduce that boundary layer with friction and all the forces that go against flying in general, then you can do all sorts of crazy aerial maneuvers and all that sort of thing, and it puts a lot of stress. There's a lot. It basically makes it a really flyable machine, and they were worried about the boundary layer because...
So, almost like defying gravity a little bit?
Yeah, because when you fly, you run into the boundary layer, and it changes how you can control the vehicle at certain speeds and altitude and that sort of thing. And they wanted something to be able to do that a lot easier. And so if they could find something that would have special controls for effective maneuverability at very low speeds or high altitudes, in other words, be able to manipulate that boundary layer, then it would greatly enhance their range and everything else, right? And flyability of whatever craft they were trying to make. Like missiles have a boundary layer issue as well. The speed, the altitude, all that sort of thing factors into how it can actually fly. And so when they were looking at different types of control surfaces or like wings or saucers or shapes, and they wanted to have this sort of thing active, the intelligence was, hey, we need to get all the intelligence we can so that the United States in general will be able to counteract that or, make that a nullified threat, right? So, and it goes throughout like 1943 into 47 where they talk about flying saucer reports and boomerang shapes and all these different types of flying like delta-shaped wings, right-angled triangles, tailless, semicircular aircraft. All of this stuff was intelligence that they were trying to gather and use. And some of this was under development by Britain, Canada, us, which is the United States. And so this is a thing. This was going on during this particular time, right? Mm-hmm. And so when they kind of went through and started looking at all these things, some of this stuff has developed or evolved into today's like delta-shaped aircraft, uninhabited or uncontrolled, or I should say unmanned reconnaissance drones. And so if you look at the timeline for this sort of thing to happen, because all these were going to be delivery vehicles for either biological weapons or atomic weapons, and everybody is trying to make this happen, and this went past the war as well into the 60s and even the 70s, it kind of makes sense that with some of the flying saucers and some of the weird things we're being seen, like cigar shapes, oval shapes, flying wings, the triangles and all that sort of thing, are all military-based.
Which is why, if you go back in history, there's more variance in the descriptions of how the different UFOs work.
Yeah, some had portholes.
Yeah, some had, like you were saying, cigar shape. Mm-hmm. And then, I guess, towards the 90s, everybody's, in everybody's consciousness, there was only one type. Maybe
the saucer.
Maybe they streamlined their ideas.
Yeah, and a lot of this was, when this was sort of going on and these sort of developments were occurring, there was even trying to get satellites, up into orbit on top of all that. And there was even theories or even sort of disinformation, I should say, going out there where, for example, there was a warhead on the end of a V-2 rocket that when it went up to a certain altitude would explode and it would send what looked to be artificial meteorites like into the atmosphere coming down, so you'd see them to sort of as diversionary tactics. So it kind of keeps going on. So you have all this speculation amongst, the news media and civilian UFO researchers as to what really was going on here, right? Mm-hmm. But if you go back and you look at the Roswell incident in 1947, and you look at this rule of secrecy that the CIA and the government in general says, hey, always camouflage your operations from prying eyes. And it really wasn't known that the Air Force and Navy were conducting like classified rocket launch reconnaissance payloads from White Sands, New Mexico. And some of those failed to reach orbit, right?
Yeah.
And some of those subsequently crashed off range and generated considerable public interest. What are you going to do? And if you take that in conjunction with the top secret Air Force atomic weapons detection program called Mogul, which involved radiation dispersal in the atmosphere, right? And they were using that with select monitoring sites in the U.S. All of this stuff is super secret. And so you take one of these wreckage from one of the payloads that was accidentally discovered by a sheep farmer not far from the Air Force's Roswell Army Airfield. What do you get?
A UFO landing.
There you go. And some of these were using balloons, and these balloons were, basically sort of coated with this metallic material. And metallic material acts as a radar target so the radar can actually track it. And it's like a type of, not polypropylene, but like propylene, to where it's not like tinfoil, you know what I mean? It has some sort of almost like plastic or vinyl type properties to it where you could scrunch it up and it'll retain its shape. But they have these silver balloons, and they're not round like regular balloons.
They're high altitude.
They're high altitude. Most of them are kind of oval shaped, right? And it is covered with this silver material.
Which could be mistaken for meteorite. I
Sure.
just realized.
Yeah, and when that balloon goes down, because these things are in the infancy of all this, and lands or crashes in a sheep rancher's field, what are you going to do, right? So what is it better to do? Say, okay, so, I mean, is it better to say it's a UFO, or, hey, we're trying to figure out how we can use all this in order to do things like irradiate the atmosphere, right? Research high-altitude research in general. Create artificial meteoroids or meteorites.
A military superpower.
Right. Utilize artificial meteor strikes as decoy devices ejected from V-2 warheads at 60 miles above the Earth to record dispersal trajectories and possible psychological warfare weapons against the Soviets in the event of a war in Europe. Can you imagine that? You create a rocket, and it shoots, goes up 60 miles, releases its payload, and you're just bombing these people from space with artificial meteorites?
Yeah.
Some clandestine junk, right? And there's been all sorts of different things that have been happening. And we're researching things like reentry vehicles that contained radium and other radioactive materials. Combine that with biological warfare agents, which were developed by, according to this document that we're talking about from Blue Boy, developed by I.G. Farben for use against Allied assault forces in Normandy. And then they say, and when a V-2 warhead impacted near the town of Corona in New Mexico on July 4th, 1947, the warhead did not explode, and the deadly cargo lay exposed to the elements which forced the Armed Forces Special Weapons Project to close off the crash site. And a cover story was immediately put out that it was discovered was the remains of a radar tracking target suspended by balloons.
Oh. Wait, we've talked about that.
Yeah. So it's like, wow, that's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
And what would you do if you published that sort of thing? So in 1994 and in 1995, the Air Force published what it considered to be the true account of what lay behind the Roswell story, but they admitted or omitted the radiological warhead data for obvious reasons. You don't want to say, oh yeah, by the way, there's possibly a radiological warhead on this thing. That wouldn't be good, right?
Well, yeah.
So
I mean, considering the blow up in New Mexico about the White Sands missile range.
Sure, and if you look at what this this radiological material, it would have the effects of almost having like a dirty bomb. I mean, how impactful that would be, I don't know, because I don't really know that much about any of the stuff that we're currently talking about. But it was known that the CIA and the Soviets were conducting the same sort of, same kind of or same type of radiological and biological warfare experiments in the early 1950s after their successful detonation of an atomic bomb based on stolen documents and materials from Los Alamos. They were behind all of this. I mean, they were like behind in the timeline it took to develop atomic weapons.
Yeah.
And their original theory was that the Soviets wouldn't have atomic weapons for many, many, many years. And boom, right? Atomic weapons go off, and less than 3 years later, the Soviets are like, hey, we got one too. And the Nazis were 3 to 4 years ahead of us.
Okay.
So it was only a matter of time, and I don't think necessarily the Nazis were going to use the atomic bomb as a bomb. I think they were going to use it to disperse radiological stuff and like a dirty bomb, right?
Yeah.
As a form of biological warfare. So, and those documents from Los Alamos were forwarded to Moscow by spies that were in the U.S. Hence, you need to keep all of this sort of thing secret because there are spies everywhere, right?
Yeah.
It's also part of the reason why the military secures their bases and stuff against people just wandering around taking pictures, because you never know. So, prior to the August 1949 Soviet atomic bomb experiment, the Army, the Navy, FBI intelligence officers had classified flying saucer sightings in the United States as top secret. So, any of these sightings that they seen were basically considered to be top secret. Because they could be the balloon, it could be all sorts of different things. They're just kind of flying up there. In other words, unconventional type aircraft or unconventional flying things without wings.
But also,
could be rocket ships,
Yeah.
Because they're testing all this stuff.
I'm also thinking about that, though. With the amount of things that get labeled top secret, like UFO, that just increases the amount of information a spy would have to sort through.
Yeah.
And if there's so much information...
And that information is actually called what?
Disinformation.
Exactly.
So if a spy had 2 minutes inside a locked room and had to grab what they could, you're increasing the odds that they're going to grab disinformation as opposed to genuine information.
Right.
So,
and the whole idea of using balloons in general is not, crazy. Mm-hmm. The Japanese did it, right, during World War II. They made these balloons that they would go up and get into the Gulf Stream or jet stream, right?
Yeah.
And the idea was they would fly into the jet stream, get to the Pacific Northwest. Eventually the balloon would deflate or, the air would go out of it, right? Yeah. I don't know whether it would deflate just as the fact that the air didn't last as long or if it was timed or whatever it was. And these bombs would crash, right? And you'd be walking along because they wanted to hit the major cities, right? Mm-hmm. So this balloon would come down and you'd walk up to it and play with it and it would just blow up.
Oh, gosh.
And so the whole idea behind that was not necessarily cause mass damage, but to cause psychological damage as a form of terrorism. And there has been a reported case where I think it was a camping trip for a church, like a church camping trip, and they actually found one of these balloons, with the payload somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, and they actually found it, and they were playing with it, and it blew up, and it killed a couple of them. And that's how they knew it was actually happening. So the idea of using balloons as radar targets or floating them across, possibly to deliver biological warfare type things is not out of the realm of the ordinary. It actually makes sense. You get the balloon up, and if you can kind of get an idea where it's going to go, you just hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
It's a simple technology, but a balloon and ballooning in general have been around since, 1800s, really? So kind of this thing sort of keeps going where they talk about different sightings that happen. Also, the idea of guided aircraft. And some of these guided aircraft lacked the range to be used because it was beyond the technological or technical capabilities of any government at that time. The Soviets and their capability weren't that secret because the CIA had the best intelligence available. Of course, that means that we had spies.
Yeah.
But for security reasons, they wouldn't discuss classified secret weapons programs in any of these documents that are under the development for these secrets establishments in the U.S., and it would be basically compromised if any of those obscure disclosure, any of those facts got out, right? Mm-hmm. So it became sort of a thing, and so the CIA paid attention to all those reports originating out of New Mexico because they already knew that the Soviets had got some information, and they were tracking different things. Like one thing was a white spherical object that was traveling too fast to be a balloon, described as being ellipsoid shape, which is kind of like a cigar shape, kind of like an oval cigar, right? Mm-hmm. And it traveled at an altitude of 60 miles with a course heading that would have covered White Sands, Holloman Air Force Base, and Los Alamos. So it would have flown with that trajectory right over it. And what it was going to do, they didn't necessarily know. So it kind of keeps going, and it sort of explains that the entire Roswell thing and most of the UFO sightings were really the idea of trying to figure out how to deliver payloads, chemical or radiological, biological weapons delivery systems, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to get better radar to be able to track these sort of things. Using some of these artificial meteors or testing some of the trajectories that these things would have as they were launched from atmosphere. It's the beginnings of the Cold War. All of this is Cold War stuff. And it's all super secret, and it's all like, oh, it's flying saucers. Oh, wait, we have a program, operate our Project Blue Book to discuss and sort of research your sightings, and people were seeing this. They were seeing these saucers. They were seeing these things.
So less of a conspiracy and more like an opportunistic cover-up.
Absolutely. I mean, which would you want the people to believe in? Hey, we're going to be trying to launch, especially with the atomic bomb that went off, right? Oh, hey, we're looking at different ways of delivering these possible biological or radiological warheads or payloads. Oh, and we're testing them in your town.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, and here's one that's crashed, or aliens.
My biggest concern is that this is a very difficult pill to swallow.
Yes, it is.
As opposed to what is considered the norm in the ufology world.
Yes.
And a lot of it makes sense when broken down in very explicit detail.
And plus, you don't want to also, you probably don't want to tell the American people that, oh, by the way, you have an operation called Operation Paperclip where they took Germany's best scientists and they're in New Mexico and they're basically experimenting and perfecting the missiles that were used to cause the V2 flap over in England. I shouldn't call it a flap, where they were continually launching V2 rockets into like Britain and England and other European countries. Yeah, that's kind of like bad form, isn't it? Oh,
and plus it's hypocritical because wasn't there the Red Scare and the witch hunt? Like, who's a communist? Who's a bad guy?
I think it was in the 50s, but
yeah.
That was part of it because with everything that sort of happened during that particular time, and it got into I think it's I want to say 57 with MacArthur and all that.
Yeah,
McCarthyism.
Yeah,
yeah, because of the spies that we had in the U.S. and all of our information sort of going over and showing up in Moscow. So we had spies, they had spies, and I'm sure all that happened as a diversionary tactic all at the same time. And then, you have crashes and you have all sort of stuff going on. So it's like, whoa, man, this is all kind of crazy. But it kind of makes sense. And if you read this, you'll get a much better understanding other than the butchered sort of read that I took over it, over the articles going, wow, that all makes sense. And there was even a theory that, when they say, what about the bodies that were, found, at the time of the Roswell crash, that some of those bodies were effectively people that went up as being part of that test, to test for things like high altitude and exposure to radiation and all the stuff that we didn't know anything about. And so, the government would find willing participants out of like the camps that we had for the Japanese, the internment camps.
Yeah.
Mentally ill people with disfigurative type diseases where the government would come and say, and you could effectively sign one of your family members away, or the people would volunteer, even prisoners that knew that they weren't going to get out, and they say, hey, if you survive, we'll let you go kind of thing. So, now I imagine that factor added to what would America think if we're testing this sort of horrible stuff on our own people. Because
aren't we currently fighting people who are doing that to other
people?
Sure.
And, this even goes back to testing some of the biological weapons that were done, over in the concentration camps in Germany where they had like 81,000 workers that they could test all this stuff on.
That's
and that particular scientist, if I read this correctly, made his way over here. So
okay, where are the pitchforks? No, I'm angry.
Yeah, and this is all, because this is World War II and all bets were off. It was like, we got to figure out how we're going to do all this sort of thing. So I read this like twice. I'm like, this is a lot, man.
Which is why these were world wars, Yeah. And
win at all cost. And then towards the end of the war, when it became obvious that people were that the war was going to end, all these countries started gathering technology, getting people away, and trying to, because they knew that, once this was all done, the race to become not necessarily a superpower, but the race to make sure this sort of thing never happened again and your country be in a stronger position if it did, occurred.
So less worldly and more, let's keep this now more contained.
Yeah. And that guy's name was I.G. Farben that we talked about earlier, who developed this stuff. And he developed the Zyklon B gas that was utilized in the terrible Nazi death camps in the Second World War.
And that bothers me because towards the end of the article, it does get mentioned that some of this controversy may be reiterated by other sites who are kind of not cool.
And can you imagine a V2 rocket that had that Zyklon B gas on it?
No.
Because in World War I, that's when really where the first sort of real instances of biological warfare happened, the mustard gas and all that stuff, and they created an armistice and signed against it so that no other country would do that because it was absolutely terrible. Mm-hmm. So it's like, whoa, man. And so you read this and you start going, this kind of makes sense. This would explain a lot. If there's a race going on and all the countries are even doing it, are trying to do it, and they're gathering resources from the end of the war, and the atomic weapons and testing from all the countries is becoming a big threat, and radar being able to detect incoming missiles, but you have to kind of figure out how you could detect these incoming missiles. All this stuff concocted together. And I mean, it sort of makes sense, right?
Yeah, but like you just used a word, concocted.
Yeah.
That makes it seem, and this is why it's such a hard pill for me to swallow and go along for the ride on this article, is this would make Roswell seem as though it was an opportunistic event and that the FBI, Air Force, CIA, all these alphabet organizations used Roswell almost the same way like a good marketing and PR firm would use a mistake.
Well, yeah, because what they did was, if this crash happened, right, and it happened outside of the White Sands Missile Testing Range, which was just called White Sands Testing Range back then, because White Sands has grown way larger than it was in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you explain your top secret stuff? And if somebody comes up and says, aliens, you just let them run with it.
It bothers me. It's such a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, but is it though? I mean, which is a harder pill to swallow? Everybody, all the countries of the world were doing their own thing, trying to make sure, since the atomic bomb went off, that they had to be able to protect themselves against, all of this. Or aliens flying across the galaxies, or whatever, through space and time, only to go whizzing over Roswell, have a problem and crash. And some people were saying that, the reason why the crash happened was because, it flew past the base, and the base has, the bases out there have these huge radar, and they got zapped with some radar, and it caused them to lose control of their vehicle, and they crashed. Well, there's also, radiation and stuff in space, so I don't understand how, zapping somebody with a microwave, zapping your vessel that you flew across the galaxy or universe or wherever you came from, or even through time, that you wouldn't be, electromagnetically hardened in that vehicle to that sort of thing to sort of prevent that sort of thing from happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'd be like, you fly across the universe, but you get here and the wind blows you down because you didn't compensate for wind.
But that's like driving across America, and then when you finally get across America, you hit that one pothole and you're done.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it happens.
I mean, sure it does, but it's less likely, and especially, I don't know. It's starting to me make more sense that I can totally see this being a feasible thing.
But like towards the end of this article, kind of indicates there's a couple of buzzwords that I completely agree with from Mr. Redfern, and that is, if this were true, that kind of puts our government and other governments in a very despicable and almost disgusting light.
Well, yes, and I totally believe that would be the case because it's war.
And yeah, I know.
And they didn't care back then.
I know war is ugly.
Now, what I don't like at the bottom of his article, of Redfern's article, where he says, my own view of all this, right, is one that many might not have taken into consideration. You will have noted that Nazi Germany gets a lot of coverage in this controversial document. I know for a fact that there are a number of people in UFO and the ufology, right, or UFO study in general, like ufology, right, who are racist pigs and have a disturbing admiration for the Nazis.
Yeah.
Yep. Undeniably disgusting. Some of them are well-known figures in the field. In view of that, I would not be surprised if Cooper was duped by someone or by a group within UFO or ufology itself seeking to further emphasize and highlight a UFO Nazi connection. And my new book, Flying Saucers from the Kremlin, is a study of how the Russians, throughout the Cold War, used the UFO phenomenon as a tool of psychological warfare against the United States. And in light of that, I'm seriously thinking of writing a similar book but on all of the many and varied racist, right-wing, extremist scumbags in ufology, and who still have a dangerous UFO-themed agenda to fly the flag of the pathetic master race. So, I would have to disagree with Nick Redfern by saying right-wing, because back then it would really be more left-wing than anything, because it was left-wing fascist, right?
Yeah.
So if he's trying to say that white supremacists are the ones that are behind UFO and ufology,
or at least duping Cooper.
or duping Cooper in general, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that he probably has way more insight into all this stuff than I do. But to the very end of it, to say, oh, well, this is because people love the Nazis and they wanted to further the white supremacy thing, I think it goes above that.
But
I don't know.
And the one thing I agree with him, regardless of right wing or racist or whatever, extremist, because we have encountered groups of ufology people in the community who now it's a new form of extremism. Like you talk to some of the love and light people and it's like, oh, all the beings are inherently female and female. It's a woman's universe.
Yeah, and vril power.
Or like the Nordic aliens. You
Yeah.
have entire groups devoted to the Nordic aliens, which, kind of Aryan in my opinion.
Yeah.
Or you have the other groups where aliens define another marginalized group of people.
Yeah.
They're an allegory for that. So the extremism thing, yeah, I'm on board. Maybe someone who is an extremist duped Cooper into having this document. But again, I wouldn't go automatically towards the Nazi thing. I do, yes, think there's a correlation there. Yes, some of the documentation we have in the ufology world does acknowledge Nazis, but
Yeah.
that's because there was an involvement back then. So,
I mean, who knows?
yeah.
And who's to say that maybe the Soviets didn't have something to do with that?
Yeah, true.
I mean, it's a disinformation thing. I mean, who really knows? I mean, but I thought it was an interesting article written by Nick Redfern, and I think he's definitely got his own opinion, which is
Unique. It's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, there is a link in his related articles, or the related article links, I should say, down at the bottom of all that, where it talked about no aliens in Roswell, where he went into more great and agonizing detail about the possibility of like human testing for all this sort of thing.
Wow.
So yeah, that a leaked UFO document and a disturbing agenda. That was from Nick Redfern on Mysterious Universe. Thought it was a pretty interesting read. Read it for yourself, because I know we probably did a pretty good job of butchering it all, but it's really just sort of want to get that sort of condensed down there. So what we're going to do at this particular point is we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The goal of M&D Paranormal is to compassionately, knowledgeably, and professionally support and offer paranormal services to those who have been affected by a paranormal experience, including those who have been indirectly affected. Services provided include paranormal investigation, property research, and evidence review of residential, business, and private property locations. Cleansing of these properties are available upon request. No matter the circumstances of the paranormal experience, M&D Paranormal strive to offer a non-judgmental environment to promote education, open communication, and empathy to each individual that chooses to share their experience or come into our service. In achieving this goal, M&D Paranormal is building and bringing together a community of open and like-minded individuals by offering free monthly gatherings and events at the Shop Eclectic, 49 State Street, Marion, North Carolina. Call us anytime at 828-484-1637 or 828-559-2818 or email us at mndparanormal@gmail.com.
And we're back.
Yep.
So if you've been listening to us so far, we very much appreciate it. It's good having you here. And if it's your birthday, happy birthday. Yeah. I don't think I did that in the beginning. So after going through reading all that sort of thing, I came across this. You ready?
Yeah.
UFO sightings, right? And
Okay.
we've been sort of talking about that. But some senators receive a classified briefing on UFO sightings.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, this is not necessarily groundbreaking, because remember in one or actually a couple episodes ago, we talked about the fact that, the government now, as in we'll say like the U.S. Navy, for example, has a form that you can fill out to get more information about unidentified flying objects. These you can get information about wanting some information, and you can also get information about how to actually report it if you see it, because primarily of the like things like the Tic Tac video, where Navy fighter pilots were saying, yeah, man, we see this kind of thing all the time. So of course the senators want to know more about it, right?
Yeah. And
so these senators, and I'm not exactly sure if there's a long list of who was there, but a group of U.S. senators, including the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, right, received a classified briefing Wednesday about a series of reported encounters by the U.S. Navy with unidentified craft.
Okay.
And this is according to a congressional aide.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, so really not the important people, but an aide. And there's a quote. And the reason why I put this in here is because, being as we're from Virginia, we were familiar with the area and the military in general. I was in the military, so kind of get where they're coming from.
I used to live near Oceana.
Exactly.
And I used to see weird stuff in the sky.
Heck yeah. And I used to sell out of Norfolk on a ship and also used to see weird things.
I used to shop at the commissary at Oceana.
Yes, because that was the better one to go to.
It was.
Yeah. So if pilots at Oceana or elsewhere are reporting flight hazards that interfere with training or put them at risk, then Senator Warner wants answers. And it doesn't matter if it's weather balloons, little green men, or something else entirely. We can't ask our pilots to put their lives at risk unnecessarily. And that's from Rachel Cohen, the spokeswoman for the Democratic Virginia Senator Mark Warner. And she said that to CNN. And I will be completely honest, full disclosure, I'm not a fan of CNN. That's just me. I'm really not a fan of most news agencies, but they're not in there. They're not in my top. Anyway, so
yeah,
the spokesman for the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations and Information Warfare also confirmed that the briefing took place. And that was supposed to be on Thursday. And it says Navy officials did indeed meet with interested congressional members and staffers Wednesday to provide a classified brief on efforts to understand and identify these threats to safety and security of our aviators.
I wonder if they were just interested or invited, or the rabble-rousers or people most concerned.
I think it's news.
Okay.
And it's in the news, and they wanted to know what was up.
Okay. Well, that's the thing. Like, who attended? I mean, we're not going to see a list of them, but I'm very curious as to who showed up. Was it senators with large concentrations of military bases in their area? Was it senators who live in states with high UFO activity? That's what I'd like to know.
Yeah, It doesn't really say.
Yeah.
And it does say that the briefing was first reported by Politico. Also, that the President Donald Trump, recently confirmed that he also was briefed, right? And these are on the reports of the Navy pilots Navy pilots spotting...
Catch UFOs on Spotify.
Yeah, because the Navy pilots were spotting unidentified flying objects, right?
Yeah.
And Trump said, I did have one very brief meeting on it. So, and he said, but people are saying they're seeing UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly. And there's also several pilots that told the New York Times in an article published in May about multiple encounters with UFOs with no visible engine or infrared exhaust plumes. And so in April, the Navy introduced guidelines for its pilots to report unexplainable events so the military can keep track of what may or may not be happening. And a Navy official told CNN, at the time, the Navy does not believe aliens have been flying around U.S. airspace.
And I greatly appreciate that statement, because at the time in April when the news came out about this process or guideline, it was all clickbait.
Yeah, and it was all U.S. Navy says there's aliens.
U.S. Navy acknowledges the existence of UFOs.
Yeah,
no, they're acknowledging they have a process in place if you see something you don't understand.
Yeah, so you can actually report unauthorized or unidentified aircraft entering, like, wherever.
Yeah.
And there's also been a number of reports of, unidentified aircraft, flying into various military-controlled ranges and designated airspace in recent years. And so these incursions, can provide a security risk and safety hazard. And now you can sort of report all these events. And so I think what actually happened here was they told these senators.
Yeah.
Or whoever they were. They don't really say.
Whoever
I'm
was
sure
interested.
it was a group of senators and all their people, right? So
Yeah.
they got a classified briefing saying, hey. But, here's the thing. If this goes back to the 40s with the, experimental aircraft and all that sort of thing that we were doing, right? And if we are way more technologically advanced than what we currently think, because everybody's trying to keep military secrets, whether it's China or U.S. or whoever, it could be entirely possible that what we're seeing are some type of military craft. And if it is military craft, like say, for example, from China or from the Soviet Union or somebody who's advanced enough to have that sort of technology, it would be good to keep track of that kind of thing.
Yeah, because even if it's not UFOs and it is some sort of unknown new technology,
You should kind of know about it.
I mean, you have to acknowledge or report it. That way you can track what unknown technology is going after you or interfering with your flight pattern.
Yeah.
And
who's to say that, maybe these things that we're seeing aren't at all manned aircraft, that they're actually remotely controlled, like drones. Because they're making some of these maneuvers and stuff that people talk about that, human probably couldn't do because they couldn't withstand it.
Yeah.
But, what if they're being controlled remotely? What if the technology is there for that sort of thing to happen,
I don't know.
who knows? Do I think that UFOs exist? There are unidentified flying objects, sure. And there are unidentified submerged objects that people see as well, sure. Are they from another galaxy or little green men or aliens? I don't know. Do I think that the possibility exists for that sort of thing to happen? I kind of think so, but who knows? How much do we actually know is information versus disinformation? If you could abduct somebody and perform experiments on them, who's to say that you couldn't plant something in the eyes or in the mind or the mind's eye that basically says, hey, we really want you to keep seeing aliens because, that was cool in the 40s and 50s and it still works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who knows? Just don't know.
I don't know.
So when this was supposed to be big news, this, senators receive classified briefing on UFO sighting, and it's clickbait. They received a briefing because they pretty much had to ask for the briefing, which is what the form was created for.
Which I think, if you pose the title that way, is actually more interesting.
To me, it is.
If a group of senators demanded to be updated, I think that not only is that more helpful and more interesting of a headline to me, it shows that in some regards, these senators are trying to look out for people's best interests.
You would think so, but I don't think so. I think that they want to be a part of something because they have never been a part of that sort of thing in the past, and they felt like they should know. And in the military and in most things, and actually when it comes to protecting secrets and governance and all that sort of thing, there's a thing called need to know.
Yeah.
And it's entirely possible that these senators that requested this briefing and actually got it aren't normally in the loop for that kind of thing because they don't need to know. So do I think it's a thing? I think, using the, hey, if this is going to cause, put our pilots in danger, then we need to know about it. Yes, that's a noble standing, a noble statement or whatever, but you know what? That's what the military is about. The military people that have joined the military, we'll call them service members, swore an oath. They totally know their job is dangerous. Absolutely. And they swore an oath saying that if they had to, they'd lay down their lives to uphold that oath. They know it's dangerous.
Okay.
So I think to kind of use that, we need to know about it. Well, you didn't seem to care before, why do you seem to care now? That was my whole thing behind that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just looking at it from a different point of view. It's like, and plus, there are briefings that you get when you're overseas about the climate that you're in. Things like terrorist attacks and, things to watch out for, hot spots. That brief that we would read in the military that you could pick up and read anytime you want is available to any senator. So I don't know. To what extent they're involved and actually care, it's really hard to say.
Yeah.
But, I agree, though, that we need to understand and identify the threats that are coming our way. Because that's what we're supposed to do. That's what our government is supposed to do. That's what military service members have agreed to do. That's what other countries that we have arrangements and agreements with expect. So, yeah, I mean, I would rather have them be aware of something whizzing around that can't seem to be caught and it evades all of our latest and greatest technology from what we see.
Yeah.
I want to know who it is, because I don't know. But see, when you see stuff like this, you also will turn around and see where like a $3 billion submarine basically sank because somebody forgot to shut the hatch. So it's like you'll see like these really crazy advanced technology sort of articles and news, like reports in the news. And then you'll see one where a country does a really dumb thing. And it's kind of like, and it happens quite a bit. I can't, really sort of say how many times, but I don't know. Thought it was kind of crazy. Brand new submarine. They forgot to shut the hatch. That's pretty embarrassing.
Sorry.
And I can't think of the country, too. And I just read that the other day, and I remember, well, there you go. So, but yeah, so is this important documentation? Is it like, groundbreaking? No, not at all. But it sort of relates, right?
Yeah.
So speaking of relates to UFO sightings, this couple
Okay.
filmed the Loch Ness Monster.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Considering what our last 2 or 3 podcasts ago, we talked about a person who said, there's no such thing as a Loch Ness Monster because the cell phone killed it. Which is basically saying that, it killed the idea of a Loch Ness Monster because with so much, at your hand technology, you should be able to capture, or would have been able to capture much bigger, much greater, more positive evidence of something actually existing versus not having a camera with you all the time, right?
Yeah.
We had the counterpoint going, well, that's great, but if you ever look at somebody using a cell phone, they usually got their head tucked down. They're looking at their feet because they're too busy looking at their phone instead of looking at their environment that they're in. So I would think that'd be a null point. But an English couple was visiting Loch Ness on vacation, and they could not believe their eyes, right? When they looked out in the water and they seen a glimpse of a strange anomaly. And they did do some video footage. They tried. And there is a black shape of what looks like a head sticking up out of the water. And they filmed it. There's a good about 36 seconds or so of footage, of this thing out in the water. They said it was about 1,000 feet away. And it was there for about a minute, and then it just went underneath the water and disappeared. And they're saying this ain't a seal,
Yeah.
It seemed to have a neck and a head. I could definitely see that it's back, and it was a fair size. It's definitely not a seal. And to that end, the couple's report was given a measure of credibility when it was accepted by Gary Campbell in the official Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register as the 7th such possible encounter with that creature this year. Because remember, we talked about Gary Campbell about 5 or 6 months ago about how he was probably going to be out of a job because there wasn't very many sightings at all, and that's his entire job was to record those sightings, remember?
Yeah, and he
even talked about it.
Yeah, because it was like he got really upset because there was only 17 sightings in like a 6-month period.
Yeah, he's it's more than that. So he was really worried about it. So, Gary, I'm sure, is very happy to go ahead and log that. But the video is there, and this came from it actually came from Coast to Coast AM. So there's a link there that you can kind of click on it and see it. But they said they've seen it from about 1,000 feet, had a head and neck, and it sits above the water, and it looks like there's something out there.
Yeah. It's interesting because you can kind of see the neck move, or what I think is the neck. And I don't know.
I'm kind of happy to see it, whatever it is. But see, this is the standard Loch Ness Monster footage that you get. Long distance, blurry, pixelated, something's big and in the water, and then it goes away, and there you go. What else could it be? If it really is from 1,000 feet, which is kind of weird because they would use like English stuff. So what's 1,000 feet in English? Like how many meters is that? Like 300 meters away or whatever?
Yeah.
It's huge, whatever it is. But it's kind of hard to tell because, you need to see the whole footage to see how far that cell phone had to be zoomed in to actually see.
And see
whatever it is that they're looking at, right?
That's like, I don't know. With me, actually, there's a good example from last week. I ran towards the evidence so I could try to get it on camera.
Yes.
Because I know my camera's not going to do it justice.
Well, they actually stopped. They were going down the road, and they seen it, and they pulled over and stopped. So,
okay.
And I guess from where they are, I don't think it could probably get any closer. They quickly pulled over to the side of the road so that they could get a better look at the strange anomaly that had emerged from the water. So they seen it pop up. They filmed it for a minute or two, probably about 40 seconds, really realistically, and then it popped back down and went underwater.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's definitely not a seal. I mean, if that was a seal, it would be huge.
Yeah.
It'd be a seal the size of, a school bus or half a school bus to be that far away. Because seals are
like
kind of big, but not that
elephant
big.
seal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes me wonder what this really is. I don't know. But I was glad to see Nessie's back and that cell phones didn't kill her. So, and it's all exciting. It's like, oh, the Loch Ness has been, captured in Scotland again. So 2019, there you go. I'm sure Gary Campbell is happy.
Yeah.
Got him a little sighting in there. So we thought that was interesting to put in there.
And the newest breaking news in the cryptid world has me super excited.
Yeah.
And that is the Corsica's Cat Fox on the trail of what may be a new species.
Yeah.
And this
You should explain cryptids, though.
Okay, so a cryptid is any animal or biologic creature that it hasn't been formally accepted by the biologists.
Yeah.
As
or not scientifically identified because
yeah. Or it's been scientifically identified, but it should no longer exist.
Yeah. So, like, for example, if you go back, I don't know how far back. If you go back far enough, gorillas were considered to be cryptids because they weren't seen. They weren't scientifically identified.
Yeah.
Like the little kiwi bird thing and all that sort of thing. So, cryptids don't necessarily have to be like Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster or Mothman or whatever.
It could be a
natural thing.
Yeah, it could be a species.
Giant
that
squid
either,
is probably a way better example to use.
It could be a species that either died out or hasn't been witnessed yet, or you thought died out.
Yeah, like the coelacanth, right?
Or the species like, what was it, about 4 or 5 years ago, is the coyotes breeding with dogs.
Yeah.
On a large scale. That's technically a cryptid.
Yeah.
Because they weren't formally acknowledged until we started seeing more and more evidence of the coyotes breeding with stray dogs.
Yeah.
So, and then those creatures breeding with other stray dogs.
And it's kind of funny because they talk about cat foxes, and the fox, which looks like a dog, is supposed to be more related to feline than canine.
Yeah, I learned that like a year or two ago. I was like, really? So, because I always thought they were more related to rodents. So.
And and this thing, some of the features that it has, it kind of looks like a domestic cat.
It does.
And the ring-tailed feline measures, in this picture, 90 centimeters, or in American, 35 inches from head to tail. So it's a 3-foot cat. Very wide ears, short whiskers, right? Mm-hmm. Highly developed canine teeth. Yeah. Very dark hind legs with stripes. The dense, silky coat is a natural repellent for fleas, ticks, and lice.
Oh, wow.
And the tail usually has 2 to 4 rings and a black tip. So it's a ringed cat. So it looks kind of like
a raccoon tail.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And it says, in the forest undergrowth of northern Corsica, 2 wildlife rangers open a cage to reveal a striped, tawny-coated animal, one of the 16 felines known as cat foxes. And it's thought to be a new species. And I think they're calling them cat foxes because they kind of look like foxes.
They do, but they also, I guess their other name, which is Gaudy Volp, in Corsican, is kind of hard for most people to say, even though I do believe Volp is Volpe is kind of a translation towards fox.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. But the...
Yeah, it's their size and their tail, which looks like a foxtail, is what got them the name across the island, cat fox.
Yeah. They're feline, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm more...
It's a huge freaking cat.
Well, so are Maine Coons.
Yeah. No, but not like that. This thing is 3 foot long. And it's like, legend has it that the cat fox is part of the shepherd mythology. From generation to generation, they told stories of how the forest cats would attack the udders of their ewes and goats. So these cats are out there attacking the like the sheep nipples.
That's terrible.
And it says, after years of playing cat and mouse, one of the animals was caught unexpectedly in 2008 in a chicken coop.
Oh, wow.
And so they started kind of researching them after that for at least 10 years. And so research got underway, and in 2012, with the help of a method involving essence attractant, in other words, putting smelly stuff out there, like live bait, kind of scent.
Yeah.
Like you do for deer hunting and things like that. It says, with the help of a method involving essence to attract the cats and a wooden stick, which they rub against to leave their, like cats like to rub on stuff.
Yeah.
They started leaving little bits of fur and stuff like that, and they were able to determine the genetic makeup.
Oh, wow.
And they said by looking at its DNA, we could tell it apart from the European wild cat. It's closest to the African forest cat. But its exact identity is still to be determined. It says with advanced photographic and later physical traps, the researchers captured their first cat fox in 2016. And there's still many mysteries surrounding the cat. Its diet and reproductive pattern yet to be studied, but they have a theory that a cat may have been brought to Corsica by farmers in 6,500 years BC.
And if that's true, that means this cat has Middle Eastern descends from the Middle East, as opposed to like the forest cats in Europe.
Yeah.
Which would give it different characteristics. Because depending on the region that, these cat ancestors came from, they all had these unique traits.
Yeah.
And this thing is a predator. That's its trait.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they even have one, they put an identification chip in the neck of the one that
Cool.
And it's like, it's a male between 4 to 6 years old. It's already been caught a few times. Has one damaged eye caused by a fight with another male. And it's got a green eye and a brown eye.
Oh, poor baby.
Yeah. So it's just a mean-ass cat. That's what it looks like.
Don't say that.
A little gnarly looking.
He's not that bad.
So the cat fox isn't really a cat that's mated with a fox. It's just a fox it's a cat with a fox-looking tail. It's this big, gnarly-looking cat. And he's got a big fat head.
In truth, it's
wide ears.
It is a cryptid. Very few sightings. Yeah. It's just now we have a way to scientifically identify it, or we're working on it. And it's also super cute. I'm not a big cat person.
That thing would claw you to pieces.
But anything that's like...
And it doesn't look... It just looks like a big, like, house cat. It doesn't really necessarily look like a...
it's a big, grumpy cat.
Like a bobcat or something. It just looks like this big, gnarly looking,
Well, you can kind of see the bobcat in it with the wide set head.
Yeah, it just doesn't have that tail. Though.
Yeah, it just... And I don't think it's got enough tufts from its ears.
He's got, like, lion stripes on him, some tiger stripes. He's got the ringtail from a fox. He's just all messed up.
He's not messed up. He's adorable.
They caught him in a chicken coop. So he's not... This one's not too smart, I guess. But, yeah, if you ever see one, the tail has 2 to 4 rings and a black tip. So they call him a cat fox.
That's so weird.
It's a cat as big as a fox.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably what we seen running across the road the other night was a cat fox.
No, that thing was probably a groundhog of some sort.
I've never seen a groundhog with a fluffy tail like that.
It wasn't fluffy. It was kind of a smooth tail.
No, it was fluffy.
I mean, it had fur, so...
Well, there's a lot of things that have fur.
Like this cat.
Yeah.
That's so weird. You go. But yeah, it's a real-life cryptid.
Now, when you come across the cryptid cat dog of the cartoon fame that I had was subject to having to watch because of my children's, that'd be something a little different.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Look how big its teeth are.
It's got huge canine-type teeth.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and take it a second. We're going to take another break, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Bobby B. from the Asheville Past Lives Project. I'd like to invite all of you CreepGeeks listeners to my next monthly meetup. Monday, July 1st, 6:30 p.m. at the Community Room at the West Asheville Library, 942 Hayward Road in beautiful West Asheville. The Past Lives Project meetup is where people interested in past lives connect, where the curious meet the experienced. We've been doing group past life mini dives for the past year with great success. If you'd like to invest 2 hours investigating some of those stories from your past that echo into your present life, here's a great place to start. Admission is free, but donations are gratefully accepted. Monday, July 1st, 6:30 p.m. at the West Asheville Library. You can go to meetup.com and search for the Asheville Past Lives Project, or email me at bobbyb@pastlivesproject.org. Thanks to Omi and Greg for keeping it creepily geeky.
And we're back. Very nice. If you get a chance to go out and see Bobby, you should do it. Bobby's a good guy.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's talk about our space recap. Space stands for Spruce Pine Alien. Is it conference or convention?
Conference.
Conference and Expo.
Yeah.
Okay, so go ahead.
No, it was just, it is conference because I kept messing it up,
I
honestly.
screwed that up the entire time. I don't know why, but, you know.
Yep.
It was a pretty good time. It was like it says, it's an alien convention, conference and Expo.
And it was a little unprecedented for such, you know.
What was the first time they did it?
Yeah, a
in
unique.
Spruce Pine, North Carolina.
You know, little unique mountain town, Spruce Pine, throwing an alien expo, basically. This area is well known for its gemstones, its hiking,
Its quartz is very pure.
Yeah, the outdoor recreation and just basically being a very pristine, very pretty old mountain town.
Yeah.
So bringing in the
UFO stuff. Well, I mean,
is a new approach.
And on top of all that, and we did an interview on this, and we actually kind of talked to them in great and agonizing detail. It makes sense. There's been a lot of UFO sightings over the whole area there.
Mitchell County actually tops the whole state as far as UFO reportings.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Yes.
Honestly. And the event, while it was the first one, I was like, wow.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah.
So people went out to have a good time, and there were some speakers there. We got to see Mary Joyce from Skyships Over Cashiers came by and say hello.
Yeah.
Which is very nice. Dr. Stamey came by and said hello. And we basically met him at the Georgia Bigfoot Conference that we did before. And who else was there? Mike Barrer was there.
And let's see, Don Cooper was there.
Yeah, Don Cooper was there.
Donna Freelick.
Donna Freelick was there.
Yep.
And it worked out pretty good. We got a chance to go and sort of see what was going on. There was a lot of people there. And we talked to a lot of people. And we had about 4 people come up and say, hey, we listened to your podcast, which was, you know, my first inclination was to apologize. And they were like, no, man, we like it. So that was actually really cool.
Yeah.
We did get some information about being able to see the Brown Mountain Lights from people who actually have seen the Brown Mountain Lights. And the couple that we talked to, or basically I talked to in great and agonizing detail, made it a point to come find us and tell us how to go see the Brown Mountain Lights.
Yeah, and their information.
And they'd seen them many, many times. They're like, this is how you see the Brown Mountain Lights. And it worked. And in our next podcast, we're going to tell you what we've seen.
Yeah.
So, a little teaser.
But I appreciated their information. It's different than all the research I've found.
And they were very specific, too.
Yeah.
And it actually worked. When we paid attention to those clues, we were able to see the Brown Mountain Lights. And we're going to, and like I said, in our next podcast, we're going to put out there the information they gave us so that maybe you can see the Brown Mountain Lights as well, because it seemed to work. But, yeah. It was kind of neat having those people come up and talk to us and say, hey, we listened to your podcast. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, we seen your interview. Yeah, that kind of thing. We were part of, what?
Also got some leads on some stories from some very helpful people that stopped by and hadn't necessarily heard of the podcast, but had a story to share.
Yep.
So.
And some people decided to share their story for a really long time.
Don't say that.
That's true, though. So, yeah, it worked out pretty good. We were part of the paranormal panel and the cryptid panel that was put on there because the organization was kind enough to let local people talk and field questions from the audience, and the audience had some pretty good questions. It was just a good time, and we look forward to seeing it next year. So,
yeah,
they had lots of things to do for their kids, and you know, I'll be honest, it was way better than I kind of thought it was going to be. Because I wasn't sure what to expect. You're never really sure what to expect.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Well, remember we went to an event for the first time in New Mexico, and we were like, oh, this is what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Pie Festival.
Yeah. It was a complete letdown.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was there. But so it was a good time. And we're not trying to give away too many details. It's
because
more than likely going to happen.
Because we want you to go next year.
Yeah, it's more than likely going to happen again. I did get to do some video and take some pictures of the main panel, which had Mike Barra, Donna Friedrich was on it, Dr. Stamey was there, and Mr. Cooper was there as well.
And if you're not familiar with Mike Barra, he's an author of unintentional fiction and writes about, things like astronomy, aliens, ancient aliens. He's been on Ancient Aliens
He's
couple
got a couple
times.
shows.
He's got several books.
Yeah.
And then Donna Freelich, she is a science fiction suspense
And
romance author.
Yeah.
Yes. And she's got an entire series of books.
Yeah, with the Interstellar Rescue series.
Yeah. And then I believe Don Cooper's written some stuff regarding ufology and
And the
Pleiadians and interactions with humans.
Yeah.
And then we also met one more author,
Yeah.
and that was Mr. Scott Lunsford. He's written a lot about the North Carolina region.
Yeah, it's more towards teens, I think. So
he actually,
the youth.
And he gave me a book.
Yes, he did.
Or two.
Yes, very,
and
yeah,
signed
couple.
them.
It's very, very nice.
Yeah.
And we also had a chance to talk to, John Stamey. And him and Matthew Delph and the illustrator, Petsimus, I can't pronounce the last name, have wrote a book called Lizard Man, Bigfoot, and Friends, which contains unpublished stories about, your favorite or our favorite cryptid and paranormal friend. And there's news stories about Lizard Man, right, which is the monster of Bishopville, South Carolina. It also includes Mothman, aliens, and ghosts. And all those stories were based off interviews with individuals who experienced them. And, like I said, we met him in Georgia, and it looks like we'll be seeing him again pretty soon. And also, did I say we met Mary Joyce there? She came by and said hello.
Yes, she did.
It was kind of nice having, and Mr. Stamey came up and said hello as well. It was just kind of weird. We were there, and people that we've seen before, like, hey, how's it going? We're like, oh, hey, where'd you come from? It was a good time, though. The space thing was pretty good because they talked about UFOs and UFO sightings, but they also talked about the gems, the minerals, the crystals, and it became apparent that the whole goal was to do something nice for Spruce Pine and make it a family event. And it was. I mean, I didn't see anything super crazy. It didn't get out of hand. It was put on. It was organized pretty well.
I loved how organized it was. In fact, the cooperation from the city and that one individual who was very Johnny on the spot about things.
That dude was it was pretty good.
Yeah.
So it worked out to be a really good experience. And if they do it again and you happen to be in Spruce Pine, North Carolina, or know where it is and you hear about it, you should probably go because it's going to be worth going to for sure next year, and it'll be bigger, better, and even more well organized and good times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know that's sort of a high level overview of what happened, but we did the interview, we talked about it, we've talked about it pretty much all the way up to it, and we got to go and hang out and vend and meet some nice people and talk to some people we've seen before. And Mike Barrett's pretty cool dude.
I liked that it was a balance. There was stuff for everyone who is very serious about the world of ufology.
Yes.
But then there was also live music and an Area 51 bounce house or playhouse.
So they pretty much just sort of said, if you want to take this sort of thing seriously, we've got people for you. If you want to go because you like aliens, we got people for you. If you want to go and have fun but not worry about being abducted and all the scary stuff, you could do that too. So
abducted by aliens.
Yeah. It was all right. So we had a good time. M&D Paranormal was there. Asheville Cryptid Society. The cryptid guy was also there.
Conjured Curios was there.
Conjured Curios was there.
A new group was there.
Yep. Who else was there?
Old North State.
Yeah, Old North State. DPO was there.
The shop was there.
Yep, Shop Eclectic was there.
And
Bobby from Past Lives, from Asheville Past Lives and Past Lives Project was there.
And one of my favorite mines was there.
Dolce Mine was there.
Rio Dolce.
Yeah, Rio Dolce. So it was a good time. So it was a good event. So if you want to go to that sort of thing, we recommend it so far. But yeah, anyway, that was pretty much about it for our little Spruce Pine.
And then as a recap, if you want to know some of the things you've missed, we have put several of the authors in the show notes for this podcast episode.
Yes.
We've also put the official site where I think you might still be able to grab a t-shirt.
Yep.
So
if that's your thing. So.
Yeah.
All right, so anyway, we're about to wrap up the podcast, but let's talk about what's next for us. What's next is an event that's going to be happening in July 2nd. M&D Paranormal Investigation event is going to be happening at the Off the Wagon Dueling Piano Bar in Asheville, North Carolina, where you can actually go on a real ghost hunt, like an investigation, if you will. This is not like a tour where you just walk around and go, yep, this is like, you can be hands-on, be K2 meters, trying to record EVPs, all that sort of thing. So you can actually go and be, on a real investigation. So if you just want to take a tour, I mean, it's probably not for you, but if you want to actually go, I've said actually like 5 times, and do an investigation, there is a link that we've included in the show notes. It'll take you to the Facebook page where you can click on it, and it's the Paranormal Investigation event at Off the Wagon Dueling Piano Bar in Asheville, North Carolina. That's going to be Tuesday, July 2nd at 6:30 p.m. So you should go and RSVP.
Yes.
So that you can go. That's going to be limited space, limited amount of people.
I mean, it's a
very
very
allowed in there.
It's a relatively big venue, but
you got
space is
too
limited.
many. Too many people is really hard to kind of control that sort of thing. So we'll be there to help, of course, and assist. And so far, it looks like there's about 70 people that are interested.
Oh my gosh!
So if you want to go, you probably need to RSVP so they can at least get you on the list to make sure. And those should be some interesting experiences occur and some swag as well. We've been going over there as part of M&D's paranormal investigation team. We've gone, 4 times now? For investigations and interviews and that sort of thing. And it's
only getting more interesting.
Yeah, it's been pretty good so far. It's very nice. And the owners are great too. Well, so that's something to go to. So again, that was the Off the Wagon Dueling Piano Bar is where that's going to be held. But it's the paranormal investigation event. It's been put on, or it's going to be hosted by M&D Paranormal and Cryptid Research, LLC. And we hope to see you there. We'll be there as well. So come by and say hello. But if you're really interested in going and you want to be able to use some high-tech handheld standalone equipment, then you probably should go ahead and RSVP. So, and I believe Bobby is going to be there as well.
Oh, cool.
So from Asheville Past Live. So very nice. But that's really about it as far as what I got.
Okay.
So,
well, the only thing I can really reiterate is if you want to reach out to the show, be sure to use contact@creepgeeks.com or hit us up on any of our social media. And we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, almost all major social media.
Yeah, the only one that we're not on as far as any, social media, we're pretty much everywhere. The only platform we're really not on is Pandora.
We even recently launched a Reddit.
What?
And a LinkedIn.
Yes.
Now, if you'd like to support the show, I know we mentioned it at the beginning of the show, or beginning of this episode, you can support us by using our Amazon affiliate link, and that link is amazon.com/shop/cheapgeek.
Yes.
Yeah. That's about it. Yeah.
So there you go. Any questions, comments, concerns, please let us know. Other than that, it's been good. Hope you come back and listen to us again. We make new content all the time. Be sure to check in for our Weird Wednesday podcast as well. So we do 2 podcasts a week. Other than that, see you later. Take it easy. Bicycle.
Bye.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.